Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. In the glamorous but dangerous world of Los Angeles fashion, where Forrester Creations stands as a beacon of beauty and cutthroat ambition, the lives of the rich and powerful are constantly on the verge of controversy and discovery. For months, the name Luna Nozawa had come to represent disaster, a young lady whose spiral into lunacy had wreaked havoc on the Forrester, Spencer, and Logan families. She had kidnapped, manipulated, and even tried murder, her desire for belonging transforming her into something unrecognizable. In a shocking turn of events, Luna died not in a blaze of dramatic confrontation, but in a sad accident, or so it appeared, when she was hit by a car driven by Dylan, the unassuming art teacher who had once been one of her unwitting victims. Dylan, with her wide-eyed innocence and sweet manner, had initially appeared only peripherally in the plot. As Hayes Finnegan's preschool art instructor, she was a background character who fit in with the environment, teaching origami and encouraging creativity in the elite youngsters. However, Luna's reign of terror thrust her into the public eye in a negative manner. During one of Luna's most bizarre episodes, she tied Dylan up and left her bound in a closet while taking Steffi Forrester hostage. Dylan survived the nightmare, terrified and traumatized, only to reveal weeks later that she was the motorist who had accidentally driven over Luna as the fugitive fled into the night. The confession reverberated through the tight-knit circles like a stone dropped into a calm pond. Electra Forrester, ever the sympathetic soul, befriended Dylan almost immediately, identifying in her a kindred spirit in need of help following the tragic events. While Spencer, Electra's loving boyfriend, joined in, showing Dylan courtesy and even inviting him to spend time at the Spencer Beach house. Steffi and Finn, Hayes' protective parents, quickly forgiven her, with Finn comforting her and assuring her that the accident did not define her as a bad person. As the holidays arrived, Dylan found herself toasting with the family at Christmas gatherings, a weird new addition to their universe. However, beneath the surface of forgiveness and holiday cheer, murmurs began to spread. Fans of the drama, those who scrutinized every glance and pause, couldn't shake the suspicion that something was wrong. Dylan had an eerie resemblance to Luna in certain lights, similar build, black hair, expressive eyes that could go from sweet to intense in an instant. And her absorption into the gang seemed too easy, too opportunistic. She had been homeless, living in her car, and filled with guilt, or so she said. But why did she look longingly at Will during those beach house moments? Why did her apologies have a sense of possession, as if she were claiming the lives Luna had attempted to destroy? The truth, buried deep in the shadows of supposition, was far more astonishing than anyone could have predicted. Luna Nozawa had not perished that night on the road. The body identified as hers was a terrible mix-up, possibly a random beachgoer who walked into the turmoil, or the catastrophe was meticulously orchestrated. Luna, even in her desperation, had survived the hit with significant injuries, including face trauma that had rendered her features unrecognizable. Luna underwent major facial reconstructive surgery after being hidden away in a covert clinic outside of Los Angeles. But this wasn't simply any treatment to restore her appearance. It was a purposeful makeover, crafted by trained hands to resemble Dylan, the woman who killed her. Why Dylan? The decision stemmed from Luna's disordered mentality, which was a mix of envy, vengeance, and perverse admiration. Dylan had unintentionally been the instrument of Luna's death, liberating her from the bonds of her previous atrocities while leading the world to believe the monster had vanished. But Luna could not let go completely. She was obsessed with entering the lives she desired, Steffi's family, Will's devotion, Electra's friendships, and viewed Dylan as the perfect pattern. Dylan was benign, acceptable, and pitted. Luna could slip back into the fold undetected by taking on her identity, monitoring, manipulating, and possibly striking again when the time came. The procedure was a masterpiece of deception. Luna, who was initially swollen and bandaged, healed in isolation while obsessively studying images and videos of Dylan. She studied her mannerisms, the delicate smile, the hesitant speaking, and the way Dylan inclined her head while listening. Voice modulation therapy helps to refine the small distinctions. When she emerged, the mirror portrayed Dylan, the forgiven victim, rather than Luna Nozawa, the famed culprit. Is this the genuine Dylan? That was the gloomy heart of the situation. In this version of events, the original Dylan died in a quieter manner, possibly muted to complete the switch, her identity assumed like a well-tailored robe. As the new year began, Dylan grew into her position. At the beach home sleepovers, she giggled with Electra about shared secrets, her gaze lingering a little too long on Will's shirtless figure near the pool. Steffi brought her to family dinners, appreciative for the woman who had unintentionally removed Luna from their lives. Finn, the caring doctor, inquired about her recovery from guilt, unaware that the woman before him carried the same deadly fixation he had once feared in his own daughter. But fissures started to show. During a holiday toast, Dylan's hand trembled slightly as she raised her glass, evoking Luna's nervous energy rather than the original's tranquility. Electra saw that Dylan seemed to know intimate information about Hayes' art choices, which only someone fully engaged in the child's life could recall, but Dylan had only been his instructor for a short time. Will noticed her glancing at old images of Luna on her phone, stating it was to process the pain, but the intensity in her gaze hinted at something more possessive. The issue at hand, what drove Luna to such extremes, was her insatiable desire for power and belonging. Rejected by her father figures, ridiculed by the Forrestas, and imprisoned for her misdeeds, Luna saw rebirth as her last option. Becoming Dylan was more than just survival, it was retribution. She could observe Steffi's mother Hayes. The child Luna might have affected if things had turned out differently. She may entertain the idea of snatching Will from Electra, repeating her previous obsessions. And, most chillingly, she could be close to Finn, her biological father, without the stigma of her previous actions. As the weeks evolved into months, the strain increased. Dylan volunteered to help with Hayes' school projects, which earned him more invites into the inner circle. She bonded with Sheila for their shared grief, with Sheila being one of the few who could tell anything was wrong but chose denial rather than losing her granddaughter forever. Lee Finnegan, ever protective, remained far, possibly suspecting but unable to prove the impossible. One evening at the beach house, while waves broke outside, Dylan stood alone on the balcony, stroking her new face in the glass door's reflection. Luna raged on the inside, even though the operation had healed wonderfully and there were no apparent scars. The issue wasn't simply the physical transformation, it was also the psychological torture of living as someone else while yearning to be her true self. Will she slip? In a fit of jealousy, show a flash of Luna's poison? Or would she succeed in completely concealing her past, becoming the acceptable one while Dylan's true absence sank into obscurity? The families rejoiced in their newfound serenity, assuming that the nightmare had ended. Katie Logan debuted her new fashion brand, which rivals Forrester Creations with new vitality. Brooke and Ridge continued their unending dance of love and struggle. Hope and Liam attempted to reconcile amidst the storm. But hiding in their midst was a ghost in borrowed skin, waiting for the right moment to remind them that monsters don't die easy. They adapt. Electra confided in Dylan about her insecurities, unaware that the council echoed Luna's manipulative whispers. Will felt himself captivated to her calm intensity, which caused subtle stress in his relationship. Steffi, as smart as ever, experienced occasional uneasiness, but disregarded it as leftover trauma. The impossible truth hung like a storm cloud. Luna had transformed herself into Dylan's image not out of necessity, but to infiltrate, watch, and possibly destroy from within. The subject was profound: identity, forgiveness, and the fragility of trust in a world where appearances may deceive and procedures can rewrite fate. As spring clothes arrived and rivalry heated up, Dylan smiled sweetly, keeping her secret hidden deep. But secrets in Los Angeles have a way of coming out, especially when the person keeping them is as volatile as Luna Nozawa. The mystery lingered. How long before the mask came off and the families learned the wolf had not only lived, but had also donned sheep's clothes that was perfectly suited to fit. In the end, the operation was more than just cosmetic. It was a reimagining of evil, patient, and plot. The bold and the beautiful world spun on, oblivious for the time being, but an undercurrent of peril hinted at explosions ahead. Luna, staring at Dylan, watched and waited, her heart pumping with the same dark rhythm that had previously pushed her. The wrong woman had been forgiven, and punishment would be even sweeter because of the deception. The drama played out day by day, with relationships disintegrating under the weight of unsaid facts. Dylan went to Forrester meetings as a guest, her eyes shining with insider information. She calmed Finn during stressful times, her touch lingering just long enough to cause subconscious unease. Electra organized girls' nights, unknowing that she was indulging her erstwhile tormentor. The psychological toll rose. Luna struggled with her new identity, experiencing times of dissociation in which she nearly addressed herself by her previous name. Dreams haunted her, flashes of the operating table, the agony of reconstruction, and the delight of deceiving everyone. One key night, during a storm that reflected the inner turmoil, Dylan stood in front of a mirror, drawing the shapes of her borrowed face. Tears flowed, not of remorse, but of triumph mixed with wrath. She had become exactly what she desired, accepted, close, and powerful in subtlety. However, the subject weighed heavily on her soul. Why this expression? Dylan represented lost innocence, the accidental hero who put a halt to Luna's rage without even trying. Luna claimed heroics by taking on her persona and incorporating it into her story. It was absolute power, to be the rescuer in their eyes while plotting the next fall. As alliances altered and new romances blossomed, the imposter grew stronger. Sheila's doubts developed, but her love to family kept her quiet. Lee ignored Dylan, her medical intuition shouting danger. The revelation was unavoidable in soap opera form. A slip of the tongue, a familiar phrase, or a scar that was buried but later revealed. When it arrived, the fallout would shatter lives yet again. Until then, Dylan thrived in the light, with Luna's darkness driving each smile. After the astonishing transformation, the game resumed. What was the matter? Everything and nothing. The ideal disguise for imperfect revenge. The story proceeded in an eternal circle of love, betrayal, and resurrection. Luna, reborn as Dylan, personified the show's essence, beauty on the surface, bold turmoil underneath. And the family, ever resilient, would face this new menace, ignorant that it bore the mark of their absolution. The word spread like wildfire throughout Los Angeles, whispering in coffee shops, buzzing in text messages, and lighting up every corner of social media. Everyone was skeptical at first. It sounded too excessive, too insane, especially for a town used to scandal. But as the hours passed, the truth began to sink in, weighty and unsettling. Luna had had face surgery to appear just like Dylan. Everyone was wondering not just how she did it, but also why. Luna had always been described as fiery, emotional, and passionate about her feelings. She loved intensely and obsessively, and when she felt betrayed, the pain devoured her entire being. Those closest to her noticed the shift well before the surgery took place. Her eyes were piercing, her movements were erratic, and her obsession with Dylan extended far beyond sadness. She didn't simply miss him, but she studied him. The way he spoke, how he carried himself, and the subtle nuances on his face whether he was angry or vulnerable. She seemed to be memorizing him piece by piece. Dylan, meantime, had been attempting to move on. After their terrible breakup, he immersed himself into job and family, ready to move on. He believed Luna, like him, needed time to heal and would eventually find peace. What he didn't realize was that Luna's version of healing was taking a darker turn. For her, letting go meant deleting herself, and she refused to leave his life without a fight. Despite how alarming it appeared to others, the choice to have surgery was not made on the spur of the moment. Luna spent months preparing, studying, and consulting in secret. She traveled under fictitious names, paid in cash, and sought complete confidentiality from the specialists she visited. Each consultation led her farther down the rabbit hole until the distinction between admiration and infatuation was entirely blurred. She wasn't trying to be a better version of herself anymore. She was attempting to become Dylan. When the bandages were finally removed, the results were both stunning and disturbing. The similarities were uncanny. The mirror reflects the same jawline, cheekbones, and eyes. Luna reportedly stared at her reflection for hours, laughing and crying simultaneously, astonished by the transformation. To her, it felt like destiny had been realized. To anyone else, it was a horrible betrayal of identity that was beyond explanation. The first cracks in the scheme surfaced almost quickly. Luna physically resembled Dylan, but the emotional and psychological burden was great. She struggled with dissociation, occasionally forgetting who she was. She practiced Dylan's voice nonstop, revisiting old recordings and movies and attempting to perfect every inflection. Regardless of how hard she tried, something always felt amiss. That small distinction, that missing piece, gnawed at her sanity. Before they realized what was going on, many around Luna noticed the changes. Friends noted that she appeared distant, colder, and almost hollow. Some stated she avoided mirrors, but others said she couldn't stop staring at them. She severed links with anyone who questioned her behavior, believing they couldn't comprehend the depth of her love or sacrifice. Isolation served as both her shield and jail. The true shock came when Dylan saw her for the first time following surgery. He was walking down the street, distracted and exhausted, when he noticed someone who looked precisely like him standing across the way. For a time, he believed he was hallucinating. The world appeared to tilt, his breath seized in his chest, and panic struck him like electricity. When their eyes met, the reality struck him with crushing force. Dylan's confrontation with Luna was one of the most terrifying times of his life. Hearing his own face talk to him in her voice sent shivers down his spine. She spoke of love, destiny, and how they were always intended to be the same, to fully understand each other. To Luna, this change represented the pinnacle of devotion. Dylan described it as a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He sought answers and Luna provided them freely, almost proudly. She described how she felt invisible without him and how becoming him helped her feel complete again. She argued that by resembling him, she could finally understand his agony, his decisions, and his reasons for leaving. In her mind, this was not lunacy. It was the pinnacle of empathy. Dylan, on the other hand, felt it as a serious violation of his boundaries and identity. He felt robbed of something extremely personal, something that belonged alone to him. Anger, dread, and guilt followed closely behind. He wondered whether he had missed the warning signs, if he might have prevented this by being nicer, more attentive, and more cautious with Luna's delicate heart. Even though he knew he wasn't to blame for her decisions, he couldn't shake the guilt. The consequences were quick and terrible. Despite Luna's best efforts to keep the procedure a secret, word spread quickly and public opinion was sharply divided. Some saw her as a tragic figure driven crazy by heartbreak. Others criticized her acts as unsafe and delusional. Psychologists spoke out on talk shows about obsession, identity issues, and the ethics of severe cosmetic surgery. Luna became a spectacle, with her anguish reduced to headlines and hot takes. Behind closed doors, the repercussions were far more severe. Luna's sense of self started to crumble. The more she attempted to be Dylan, the more she lost touch with who Luna had always been. Simple choices became daunting. Was she deciding what she wanted or what Dylan would want? The misunderstanding resulted in dramatic outbursts, deep melancholy, and terrible moments of clarity in which she understood how far she had gotten. Family members attempted to intercede, encouraging her to seek professional help. Some implored her to reverse the operation so she might restore her own face and identity. Luna protested vehemently, perceiving their worry as rejection. To her, losing Dylan's face meant losing the final link she believed she had with him. She held to the belief that if she only tried harder and mastered her impersonation, everything would eventually make sense. Dylan, meanwhile, was dealing with his own inner torment. Seeing his face on someone else caused a profound existential crisis. He avoided mirrors because he was afraid his identity would no longer be his alone. Trust became tough, relationships strained, and he began to doubt his reality in ways he had never done before. The encounter left invisible scars that impacted every subsequent connection. Luna's mental health continued to deteriorate over time. The first joy of metamorphosis gave way to paranoia and depression. She became sure that everybody were mocking her and that Dylan was secretly critiquing her performance as him. Sleep avoided her, replaced by vivid visions in which she and Dylan melded into a single unidentifiable entity, neither entirely alive nor wholly dead. The sadness of Luna's narrative resided not in the operation itself, but in the unmet emotional demands that drove her there. She had never learnt to exist without identifying with someone else. Love, to her, was complete immersion, even erasure of the self. Without direction, support, or appropriate boundaries, that belief became a ticking time bomb. The issue eventually came to a breaking point. Luna was forced to face reality following a public occurrence that generated severe concerns about her own and others' safety. Medical professionals intervened, and for the first time, she couldn't flee or hide behind secrecy. The journey ahead was long and uncertain, filled with therapy, tough truths, and the arduous process of rediscovering Luna beneath the borrowed face. For Dylan, healing entailed recovering his identity and discovering that compassion did not necessitate self-blame. He had to realize that, while empathy was valuable, duty had limitations. He began to open up about his experience, not to sensationalize it, but to warn others about the dangers of untreated fixation and the significance of mental health care. Finally, the story had more than just surgery and shock value. It was about how fear and insecurity can turn love into something horrible. Luna's change into Dylan was a physical symptom of a deeper emotional breakdown, which might have happened to anybody who lacked the means to deal with loss and rejection. There were no easy answers or elegant resolutions. Just the gradual, terrible process of reassembling identities that had been shattered by obsession. Luna needed to realize that she was deserving of love for herself, not for someone else. Dylan had to realize that his face, life, and choices were entirely his own. The scandal would ultimately disappear from public consciousness, replaced by the next astonishing headline. However, for those involved, the ramifications would endure a lifetime, serving as a chilling reminder that losing yourself for love is the most hazardous transition of all.